Hey there, so today what I'm going to be sharing with you is how I'm going to work on this commission piece that I have. It's this little conductor guy that'll be about 6 3/4 inches tall, and he goes with a special kind of organ that's handmade. And I have a client who wants this created for him, and he wants to be able to turn it into a bunch of them, so reproduce them in resin. And so I'm going to show you how I'm going to go about this project. First of all, I've been given a schematic sheet, so I kind of know what size to make him and what different pieces to have. I've actually had to play around with the size a bit, and luckily there's this 18mm reference point, so I just played around on my computer until my copy popped out with that measuring 18mm, so I've got the correct size. So let's get started. Alright, so since this is going to be a prototype rather than a one-of-a-kind sculpture, because it's just going to be painted and used to cast in resin, so I don't have to be so careful about the clay that I use being the exact color that I want. And so this time I'm going to go ahead and use some Super Sculpey. This is actually some older Super Sculpey that my daughter used a while back, but I'm going to use it and some older Pro Sculpt Baby, and probably throw in some fresh Super Sculpey too. So it's kind of like a medium hardness of clay, but the reason I'm able to do this is it's a great way to use up older clay, and it's not going to matter what the surface is like as far as if there's moonies or anything like that. So I can pretty much just use whatever clay I want according to how it feels to my hands. So I'm just going to use one of my clay cutters to just chop all of this up finely, and then I'm going to throw it into my little food processor that I have set aside just for clay. So here's my little mix, and I'm just going to grind it up with my food processor. I've added just a little bit of Cernit too for extra strength, and a few pieces of just old clay mixes that just ended up with a tiny bit that I didn't turn into anything. So quite the mixture here. And here's the results after 10 or 20 pulses. It's starting to kind of almost turn doughy. So now I'm going to take it out, and it's kind of like styrofoam or corkboard at first, but then if you just keep squishing it, then it turns back into clay. And so I'm going to take this out and kind of make it into sheets, sort of like this, and then run them through my pasta machine. So I'll have one uniform kind of clay to work with. That's how I prepared it, using older clays and a bunch of Super Sculpey, but still getting the firmness that I want. So something interesting with this particular sculpture is that the inside is supposed to be hollow, because there's going to be some wires and stuff that go inside, so the arms will actually move. So this is what I'm going to tackle first, is this inner part. And so what I did was first cut out a template of that square size, that rectangle. And then I rolled out some of my clay using my pasta machine just on the thickest setting. You could also just use a cup to roll it out too. And then now I'm just cutting the template. I've done all the edges. Now I need to cut this one as well with my clay cutter. So now I have this piece of clay that's the exact size of the template, and I'm going to zap it with a heat gun so it's more baked, and then turn it into a little box. Alright, so next I made a few more little templates. So I've got these sides that I'm going to stick up on the edges of these. Two of them I'll cut down so they can be the shorter side, and then for the longer side. And I'm going to be using some of Sculpey's Bacon Bond, so I can run a line of that along these edges, and then I'll bake this whole piece once it's in its box shape, and that will stay together really well with that Bacon Bond. Alright, so the two long sides, pretty easy, pretty self-explanatory. And on this last one, I just am sure to get the Bacon Bond clear over to these edges as well. And then I'll be putting this up, and then I'll be slicing that end so it's even. Then I just repeat that for the bottom. Alright, now I'm going to pop this in the oven for about 15 minutes or so and let it get nice and hard. And in the meantime, I'll be working on the arms. So the first thing I'm going to do is just take some of my armature wire. This is the 16 gauge aluminum. And I'm going to make a little armature, measuring around the size of the arm. And keeping in mind that I can trim this however I need to. So I'm just going to wrap it with a little bit of foil, probably the aluminum foil tape, and then wrap that with the paper tape. Alright, so here's my little arm. I'm also thinking that it could be done on a skewer. That would work too, but I'm going to do it this way. So kind of goes like that, and then I'm going to wrap it with paper tape, and then repeat for the other arm, and this other arm is more bent. And I'm leaving the place the hand's going to be kind of longer, so I can trim that later as needed. And then next, I'm just going to smash out kind of a snake of clay so I can put a thin layer around this whole piece. So that will keep the paper tape in place and give me a surface to start sculpting on. So I just begin layering on the clay, looking for the landmarks like the elbow and where the wrist is. And then I need to fill out this shoulder quite a bit. But I think at this point I'm going to heat set this so it's harder and sturdier. Since this doll is just a prototype rather than a one-of-a-kind, then we get to do other things like that, like sand it, carve it, heat set, work in layers, lots of stuff that could end up leaving you moonies or cracks or other issues for a one-of-a-kind doll. But since this one's just going to be a prototype, we get to do it the easier way, which is adjust as you go and bake as you go. Then while this first arm is cooling now, I can catch up this second arm. So I've just got the armature made, and now I'm going to put some clay all around it. And I've made the armature shorter at the top because I know my client's going to need to drill into the top of it, and I don't want it to run into the armature. So that's the reason for that. Another way to wrap the arm with clay is to just use a sheet that you've run through the pasta machine, and then I'm just going to be folding all the sides up on this. Smooth it in nicely. Alright, so our little inside piece is all baked, and you can see it's actually larger than the drawn rectangle here, but the inside is the same size, so that's going to be fine. And then it looks like I'll need to hollow out the sides here to make room for a wire that will eventually be placed in it, and probably at the top too. So I'll just cut those, and probably at the bottom as well, but it looks like it's going to be far enough in on the sides, so I can just fill all this in with clay. And then that's how it will go as a side view there.